here to listen about running projects, the Waterfall, Agile and Hybrid Way. Whereas the original title of my presentation is actually Executives, all you always wanted to know about Agile, but were afraid to ask. And there's a reason. I'm sure you already recognize the reference to a famous movie that had to do with sex. And I think there is a connection because Agile is very sexy. It's very trendy, very hot. It is the thing at the moment. And it's gaining ground, and everybody's talking about Agile. And today I would like, first of all, to try to answer that question. First of all, just for the sake of keeping things nice, neat, and tidy, I would like to go through the main differences between Agile and Waterfall. I'm sure most of you already know the differences, so I just, for the sake of making sure that we are all on the same page, let's very briefly run through them. The traditional Waterfall approach is based on a very strict work structure, very strict hierarchy, and strict planning. It relies very heavily on the step-by-step approach. So you do things phase by phase. Only when one phase has been completed can you move on to open another phase. This also means that once you are past a given phase, you cannot simply climb back. It's a waterfall after all. Waterfall divides your project subdivides your project into stages, as I've mentioned before. The first stage being gathering information, setting requirements, and preparing documentation. It is quite a long phase, and one of the downsides of Waterfall, I think, is that after you've put in all that work, you've put in all the time, you've done all this amazing work, preparing your documentation, there comes this horrifying realization that now you actually have to do what you have planned. Documentation, as I said before, is very, very important in waterfall approaches. What's documented is practically set in stone. It is your constant. Agile, on the other hand, is very, it's much more relaxed and laid back. There's no strict structure, there's no strict hierarchy. It is about an ongoing process of work based on a rapid feedback loop. You must be familiar with this plan, do, check, adjust cycle, also known as the Deming cycle. It is based on an incremental progress. What Agile does, it recognizes that the market that you compete in is evolving very quickly, and changes can happen daily. They can happen overnight. So what Agile does, it gives you this unprecedented adaptability. It allows space, room for change to be addressed. So whenever a change is necessitated by, whenever you feel like you need to adapt your initial plan, because it is necessitated by the ever-changing circumstances of the project, you can do it with ease. Right, what else? There's no excessive documentation, and some Agile teams they actually claim that if you're working Agile, you are completely relieved of documentation whatsoever. This is not completely true, but in fact, there's very little documentation compared to waterfall approaches. Some say in Agile there's no documentation, there's documutation, and documutation is translated as the transformation of your development notes from multi-page to a post-it size. All right, so that's basically it when it comes to, well, this isn't it. You can compile a much longer list of differences. sometimes I've been talking for like 5 minutes now, but whereas in fact I could have just shown you this, which very nicely graphically presents the difference between waterfall and the long line is your build, the dot is your release, and the star is your customer feedback or your market feedback. And while Agile may be a very good way to run a project, it is a very bad way to cross a street. Right. Having talked about these differences for some time now, it's funny because I feel like we've not even touched to the, to the bottom of things. We're not even close to discovering the essence of the difference between waterfall and agile. Because when you think about it, there's a crucial difference in the way waterfall approaches and agile approaches make commitments. Ideally, in a waterfall approach, you would like to get a given scope of work done within a given set time to a given budget or under a given budget. But as we've said before, circumstances change. So what happens when they change? You need to take a decision what to sacrifice. And you cannot sacrifice the scope. This is your constant. If you sacrifice the scope, you cannot complete your project. You cannot deliver what you promised to deliver. So there are some options that you can choose from. You can either sacrifice the cost and go to your senior executive and tell him or her, I will need some more money because things have changed and now we cannot complete our project within this agreed budget. Or you go to her or him and tell them, we need an extension because it's impossible to complete the project on time. In a great number of cases, you won't be able to sacrifice time or cost, so you will need to sacrifice something else, something very important, and that is quality. Now, Agile faces this dilemma of what to sacrifice in a completely different way, because it actually doesn't even face this dilemma. This dilemma is just absent in Agile approaches. Because Agile assumes that you cannot fix the scope of work, the schedule, and the budget at the same time. So in Agile approaches, you keep time and cost and quality constant, but you allow your scope to vary. So that's, I think, this is what I think is the main difference between the two project management styles. And let's look at the practical, consequences of this. You have a team, you have a more or less fixed budget, you agree to do something to a given schedule, you promise to work to the best of your abilities, but the scope of delivery is unknown. So in essence, what you say to your CEO is this: I would like you to invest this amount of money and give me this amount of time, and I will really do my best, but I don't know what I'll deliver. What this means for a CEO, for your senior executive? Well, that means that he or she is very, very cautious. No matter how cautious they are, they cannot stop the growth of Agile, because it's growing, it's becoming more and more popular as we speak. But it's not that by growing, it is pushing Waterfall into oblivion. Far from that. Quite, I'd say the opposite is true. A study by our Project Management Institute shows that only 11% of companies declare using Agile in their day-to-day operations. 12% don't use any Agile. They don't use it at all. So what we have in between is 70% of companies who actually make an attempt at combining, combining the two approaches without developing a split personality syndrome at the same time. So how to do it? And keep your sanity. There is a way to do it. As I said before, it looks like hybrid is the answer to the needs of most companies nowadays. And I believe you already know why, because there are different levels at which your projects are run. So depending on what level you are involved at, you will either want to stick to take the advantage of the unprecedented adaptability and flexibility of Agile, or you'll want to stick with the traditional waterfall approach, because it is much more, it makes things more manageable from the executive point of view. It gives you the big picture. It gives you the bird's eye view of your project. It allows you to keep an eye on your milestones, your deadlines, your risks, your objectives. So it allows you never to lose sight of the big picture. And this is exactly where big picture comes into being in my presentation, because big picture is actually a tool that allows you to very cleverly and effectively combine the two styles. And I'll just show you, I'll just give you a hint. I'll just show you a few examples. If you want to discover more about how flexible the tool is and how it allows you to combine the two approaches, you are more than welcome to come and join my workmate Mateusz, who will be running a workshop tomorrow morning at 9:30. And now I'll give you the examples. All right. I'll start with something that is normally associated with waterfall approaches. This is the Gantt chart, a timeline-based planning tool. And I'm sure most of you are already familiar with what it does and what it looks like. And Gantt is usually thought of as being purely waterfall. In fact, it doesn't have to be so. We've decided to put a schedule of your iterations into our Gantt chart. This way, you can do things, you can schedule things the Agile and the waterfall way at the same time. It looks like some... Okay. Let me find the right slide, I'm sorry. It looks like one of my slides is missing. All right, I'll show you what is presented here. I'll use this one instead. Okay, this is what you can see there on the left-hand side of the slide is a scope. The scope module is your work breakdown structure. And what you can do here is you can track the progress of your project by seeing, the time tracking view, so the waterfall way, or you can see the story points. So you can also watch, you can also use your Agile approach. And to see how big picture can be used for the Agile part, let's take a look at the typical Agile board. We descend to the team level, because nowadays teams, in software development, in finance, in healthcare, I'd say that also marketing departments or research and development departments in just any sector, rely on planning the 2-week or 3-week iterations. And typically in big picture, they would use this. What you have here is your backlog of tasks. And by simply dragging and dropping them, you make your plans. And two things will happen immediately. If you imagine a team doing the planning for the next 2 weeks on a given Monday, and what they are doing is they are dragging, dropping the tasks, putting them, attaching them to the upcoming iteration, what will happen is that these will become instantly visible on the senior executive Gantt chart. And if the decisions have the potential for hitting the higher level plan, it will also become visible on the Gantt chart. Okay, what you see there, the red contours, this is actually where some tasks have been rescheduled, which means for a senior executive, it may mean that there is a risk of not keeping a given deadline. All right, there's more to discover about BigPicture. As I said before, this is just a very small hint at the potential, the capabilities of this tool. So if you want to discover more, please come and join us tomorrow at 9:30 to take part in a workshop entitled Ensure Your Project Completes on Time by Managing Resources Using BigPicture. Thank you very much.